Okay, so I've been informed that I need to read more of my original work. Uh, the same story, which I did not leave on an actual break in the story. I just kind of stopped reading. But I'm going to read more of that because it's really cool and exciting. And this time I'm actually going to time myself so that I don't have to click back and forth and make really annoying noises with the mouse. Trackpad. Whatever. So, when last we left our heroes, nothing was happening. Okay. Daniel sighed, feeling heat rise under his collar. Okay, fine, he mumbled, looking at the floor. So we'll get there early. And dinner's on me. Not on your life. Minami grinned, instinctively hiding the expression behind her hand. Culture dies hard. Oh, if you insist. We all know who wears the pants in this relationship. Daniel looked down at himself, then over at Minami's bare legs, then up at her fluorescent blue eyes. You sure got everyone else fooled. They exited Herringer and hopped back onto the sidewalk, still hand in hand. It was full dark out, and Minami's fiber optics blazed. She outshone Daniel like a star outshines its orbiting planets, and sometimes he felt like she was burning him up. They strolled out of the mall area and into the heart of downtown, the sidewalks crowded with all manner of people, clad in sequins and lights, bedecked with aluminum and tinsel, iridium if they were wealthy, all gleaming and glimmering under the bright, cold light of the LED street lamps that blinded pedestrians to the night sky above, while casting scarcely a single photon up into it. On a clear night, you could stand on the roof of a tall building in the city and see the foggy band of the Milky Way. If you watched closely, you could see the bright sparks of mining rockets launching and landing 200 miles away at Tyson Spaceport. Far away, on the hill, the eagle's eyes lit up, like two distant emeralds in the night. The lights would stay green unless there was an alert, when they would turn red, and the giant beak would open and issue a siren call that could be heard 20 miles away. It was deafening within the city. Daniel shook himself and looked away from the eagle when Minami pulled him off the sidewalk and onto the front steps of the club. You can get changed in the bathroom, she told him. They shouldn't let you in looking like that, but they will. You're with me, after all. If I could have gotten in like I am, he objected, why are you making me change? She rolled her eyes, tugging him up the stairs. Because once we're inside, the last thing I want is everyone staring at you. Come on, Daniel, I promise you'll have fun. When have I ever lied to you? That was one of those dangerous questions, Daniel knew, like, does this make me look fat? He struggled for a moment, trying to think of a response just non-committal enough to not get him in trouble, without being an outright lie. I'm here, aren't I? He said, stumbling over the words a little. Would I be here if I didn't believe you? Yes, I think you would, Minami said, looking at him more intensely than he felt was warranted. But never mind that. We have some serious partying to do. At the door, the bouncer looked Daniel over coolly with a mismatched gaze. Daniel wasn't sure which eye was more disconcerting, the ice-blue human one or the aluminum and plastic one with the faintly glowing red light in the center, with an apparatus that wrapped neatly around the side of the man's head and tucked behind his ear. Minami held out her ID chip, dangling from her keychain amid a swarm of other tchotchkes, and a red laser web flashed briefly from the man's robotic eye. The apparatus let out a small beep, and the man nodded. Welcome back, Miss Hawkins. He glanced coolly at Daniel. And guest. I promise, he cleans up okay. I'll kick him out myself if anyone complains. The edge of the bouncer's mouth twitched, and the aperture on his robotic eye spun ever so slightly. Daniel wondered if the man was zooming in on his face and taking his picture. He wouldn't have been surprised. It was hard to go 10 feet in the city without having your picture taken. In you get, then, the bouncer said, and opened the door for them. The sound hit Daniel like a crashing wave, pounding in his chest and pressing hard against his ears. Since the advent of cheap soundproofing, noise complaints were a thing of the past, and clubs had taken the liberty of cranking up the volume as high as the latest speaker release would allow. As Minami dragged him inside, she pulled a pair of orange earplugs from her purse and handed them to him with a knowing smirk. Gratefully, Daniel screwed the soft foam into his ears, and was gratified to hear the decibel level halved. He could still feel the music resonating in his chest and pulsing up through his feet. No wonder everyone was dancing. Minami guided him through the press of bodies to the bathroom, where she handed him the bag with his clothes in it and shoved him inside like a mother sending her child off to his first day of school. She even waved coyly at him as the door closed between them. The restroom was nearly silent, between the half-proofed walls and the earplugs. Daniel locked himself in a stall, pointedly ignoring the other two men in the bathroom, feeling himself flush. He changed quickly and paused a moment on his way out to smooth his hair in the mirror. He had to admit he didn't look half bad. The shirt had nearly the same color and sheen as his windswept hair, which despite his best efforts never quite stayed slicked back all the way and curled over to tickle his neck and ears. It was cut just right to make him look more slim than gangly. The black and gold color scheme lent his face a warmer cast than it usually had. Hundreds of hours in front of a computer screen had left him sallow, even given his coffee-colored complexion. It was known around the city as a coder's tan. Just as he was on his way out, he made out the distinctive sound of a human voice, distorted beyond comprehension by his earplugs. He pulled out the right-hand one and said, "Sorry?" turning to face the other two men in the bathroom. He realized immediately that they weren't men at all. They were security bots, hulking things with a single red eye in the center of their faces, plated in carbon fiber armor and carrying an internal arsenal of weapons that would make a tank green with envy. They were vaguely human-shaped, with thick necks and barrel chests, across which their bulky arms were crossed. "Identification requested," the one on the right droned. "You have 22 seconds to comply." 22 seconds, Daniel thought, fumbling for his wallet. It was always 22 goddamn seconds with these things. He didn't mind occasionally being chipped. He only minded a little that if you didn't get your chip out in time, they would hook you on the spot and hold you there until the police arrived. But the fact that it was 22 seconds, not 20, not 25, got so deep under his skin it made him itch. "You have 10 seconds to comply," the bot droned. Something inside its arm made an ominous series of clicking noises. Daniel finally caught hold of his ID chip and dangled it in front of the bot's single red eye, stating breathlessly, "Daniel Rodriguez, RODRIGUEZ, 140 Cherry Street, Apartment B." A laser web shot from the bot's single eye, scanning Daniel's ID chip. Half a second later, the second bot scanned his face, rather more thoroughly. A seemingly interminable time passed in near silence, the bots standing perfectly still, their cybernetic brains whirring. Daniel could see his ID chip swaying on the end of its chain as his arm shook. "Approved," the first bot droned. "Move along." Daniel bolted from the restroom as quickly as he could without actually running. The noise of the club struck him in the right ear like an ice pick, and he screwed the earplug back in, wincing. Someone grabbed his arm and he jumped violently, spinning on his heel to face the culprit. Minami stood next to him, concern and amusement vying for pride of place on her countenance. "Bots!" he shouted, unable to hear his own voice, hoping she could lip-read him. "I got chipped!" He raised the chip in explanation, hoping between the demonstration and the lip-reading she would get the message. He could only assume she'd understood, because she nodded sagely and dragged him off into the crushing press of bodies. It was difficult to believe that any kind of lumbering security bot could get to him in that mess. He could barely get to himself. He wasn't sure how much longer it was before Minami pulled him out of the human sea and through a sketchy-looking door at the back of the club. It could have been an hour, it could have been 5 minutes, it could have been several days, for all he knew. When the door closed behind him, though, it was as though the whole world had gone silent. Minami reached over and tugged out one of his earplugs. Just on the edge of hearing, he could detect the bassy thump of the club, but the soundproofing of the room was too good to let anything else through. "Sit down, Daniel. It's time you met the crew," Minami said, gesturing to a chair. Daniel looked at the room in earnest for the first time. It was dim, only lit by a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. Directly beneath the bulb was a circular table with 6 chairs arrayed around it. 3 of them were full. 2 men and a woman sat staring at Daniel, their expressions as varied as their appearances. The man farthest to Daniel's left was a hulking giant, crammed into his chair apparently by force of will alone, his neck as thick as his head and his bulging arms as big around as Daniel's leg. He had dark, close-cropped hair, the skin the color of mahogany, and glittering black eyes, and on his flat, heavy-featured face was an expression of grave suspicion. To his left sat the second man, as different from the first as it was possible to be. He was thin and wiry, so pale of skin and hair that he might have been an albino, his eyes hidden behind wire-rimmed dark glasses. He was smirking, his thin lips quirked up to one side and down on the other, his twiggy arms crossed over his chest, slouching in his seat. The third person in the room, the woman, was leaning forward in her chair, elbows on the table, staring intently at Daniel as though she could see right into his head and read his thoughts like a newspaper. She was overweight, her arms soft and pudgy, her face round as a new moon. Her black hair was elaborately braided and adorned with small loops of iridium, glimmering in the half-light. Her full lips were taut, a thin line between her brows, her dark eyes narrowed. The longer Daniel looked at her, the more convinced he became that she actually was reading his thoughts, such was the intensity of her gaze. Next to him, Minami dropped herself into a chair. "Seriously, Daniel, sit down. You look suspicious standing there, and I'm not introducing you until you sit down." Daniel carefully placed himself into the chair next to Minami, leaving a gap between himself and the huge man with the glittering eyes. Minami, still with an air of careless disregard, pulled a slim case out of her purse. "Cheers, everyone," she said, opening the case. Within there were 5 tiny plastic bags of white crystalline material. Daniel felt his heart stutter. "Minami, what the hell is this?" he demanded, gripping the sides of his chair. Minami sighed. "This isn't what it looks like, I swear, Daniel," she said. "Don't freak out, okay? We have to do this, to keep up appearances." "Keep up appearances?" Daniel squeaked, leaping to his feet. "Minami, this is stupid! What the fuck, Minami? Seriously, what the fuck?" Minami stood up, putting a hand on his arm. He wrenched away from her. "Listen to me. Just for a second. This room is bugged all to hell, but the vibrations from the club mean they can't hear a word we say. All they have is eyes, so we have to keep up appearances. Nobody cares if you lick crystal in a back room at a club. But the kinds of things we talk about? They're dangerous, Daniel, so we have to keep up appearances. Make the people watching believe there's a reason we come back here so that they don't care what we say. Who cares what a bunch of crystal heads have to say to each other when they're flying high? Nobody. So please, Daniel, stay and listen to what we have to say. I wouldn't have brought you here if we didn't need you, if I didn't trust you. So please, sit down, Daniel, and do this one thing for me, and I swear to you it will all make sense in 2 minutes. Daniel looked at her hard, searching her face for any hint that she was lying. "The stuff," he said eventually. "Is it real?" Minami nodded. "Not even slightly. It's sugar." The huge man grunted. "If he's freaking out now, maybe we shouldn't let him in on it." The thin man scoffed, his smirk not even faltering. "Yeah, she said he was a prude, didn't she? I'm enjoying this little show." The black woman said nothing, continuing to watch Daniel like a hawk. Slowly, Daniel resumed his seat. "I'm only doing this because I want to know what the hell is going on here," he said. "This is one time you'll be glad you let your curiosity get the better of you," Minami said, distributing the baggies of white sand. "I promise you that." Okay. It has been many minutes. Possibly too many minutes. Ah! No, I have 2 minutes left. Good. I can't do math in my head. "You make an awful lot of promises," Daniel grumbled, accepting the baggie he was given with shaking hands. His insides were squirming at the thought of what he was going to do, but the inside of his skull itched like mad with curiosity. He glanced around the table at the others, twitchy, his eyes darting. The procedure was the same for all of them. Open bag, pour contents onto tongue. Close mouth, close eyes, sit back for a second and swallow. Is this really what it looks like? He wondered. Is it so casual? Play along, Daniel, Minami hissed, kicking him under the table. His hands trembling, Daniel copied the actions of the others. It took him 3 tries to open the baggie, and when he did, he spilled at least half the crystals on the table. Minami laughed at him, her eyes sparkling. Maybe it's really crystal, he thought, heart pounding. He brushed it off the table into his hand, most of it sticking to his sweating palms. Finally, he managed to get a significant amount of crystal onto his tongue. It was sweet, but had no other taste than that. He leaned back in his chair, breathing deeply, still shaking, but the terror had gone out of him. It really was just sugar, nothing else. He closed his eyes and swallowed, and after a moment the shaking subsided. Weakly, he smiled at Minami. "You were unwise to doubt me," she mocked him, smiling. "I was," he admitted, "and I'm sorry." He looked around the table at the others, who were all staring at him now, and then back at Minami. "Now would you please tell me what the fuck is going on?" She took his hand under the table. "I'd be glad to. First of all, crew, this is Daniel." "We know who he is, Minami," the thin man said. "It's not like you haven't been telling us about him for 3 weeks. 3 weeks? Daniel thought. How long has this been going on? Minami continued as though she hadn't been interrupted. "That smartass," she told Daniel, gesturing to the thin man, "is Alan. He's our research specialist and bookkeeper." "And con man," Alan supplied, grinning at Daniel. "Him," Minami indicated the muscled man, "we call the Hulk." "Can't imagine why," Daniel managed. The Hulk's jaw clenched. "Funny guy," he said, as if Alan weren't bad enough. "You know you love me," Alan retorted. "Fuck off, Alan," the Hulk answered. "They're married," Minami told Daniel, grinning. "The Hulk is our strongman, pilot, and supply guy. He's got a few military connections, too, in case we need a bailout." "Bailout?" Daniel said. "From what?" "And this lovely lady to my right," Minami forged ahead, "is Annika. She's—" "I believe coordinator is an appropriate term," Annika supplied. Her voice was soft and lightly accented, her consonants soft and her vowels rounded. "Brains behind the operation," Alan put in. "If it all goes to hell, now you know who to point at and say, 'I swear, officer, it was all her idea,' before they ship you off to the mines." "Shut up, Alan," Minami snapped. "You're not helping." "The mines?" Daniel said. He suddenly felt very lightheaded. "What the hell are we doing that's going to get us sent to the damn mines?" "Calm down, Daniel. Nobody's getting sent to the mines," Minami assured him, casting a barbed look at Alan. Daniel turned to Minami. "What's your part in all this?" he demanded. "Con men, suppliers, operation? You still haven't told me what the hell you're dragging me into!" "Calm down, Daniel," Minami warned him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the Hulk cast a wary look at the security camera perched in the corner. "I act as recruiter, liaison, and miscellaneous." Alan snorted. "She's the one who starts shooting when I can't talk my way out of something. Or into it." He raised his hands, palms out, and amended. Okay, no actual guns involved. Why don't you guys take the sticks out of your asses and—" "That's enough, Alan," Annika said. Alan fell silent and settled a little more deeply into his chair. Daniel breathed deeply, trying to shut out the world around him. He focused on Minami's gold nail polish, burnished in the dim light of the single bulb above him. "So what am I here for?" he asked. There was a very quiet moment, when he could hear the walls shuddering with the bass from the club. "You're our inside man," Minami told him. "We needed someone with access to the government's systems. Somebody who could get their files, their codes, their secrets, without it being suspicious." Daniel gaped at her, wide-eyed. "You want me to hack the government?" he said. "Well, yes," said Minami. "That's exactly what we want you to do." "No way!" Daniel snapped, rising. "No way in hell! That job is my life! If I get fired, I'm out on the streets. No food, no money, no nothing. I'll probably have to go off-planet if I get fired for hacking. No, count me out. There is no way." "Told you he'd pussy out," the Hulk commented to Alan. "All the damn coders are the same." "I take exception to that," Alan replied. "I've written a few programs in my life." He turned to Daniel. "And you don't even know what we're doing." "I don't care what you're doing!" Daniel cried. Everyone in the room, with the exception of Annika, shushed him hurriedly. "The cameras are compromised, not dead," Minami hissed. "Sit down, calm down, and quiet down for fuck's sake." "Your 2 minutes are up," he accused. He was shaking all over. Maybe it hadn't been sugar after all. "Daniel," Annika said softly. Something inside him settled, as though his entire being had been turned from vibrate to silent. "Tell me about your father." A great emptiness opened up inside Daniel, and all feeling drained away through it. He sank into his chair, head pounding like the bass in the club. He leaned his elbows on the table and put his head in his hands, twining his fingers in his hair. He began to talk mechanically, like one of the hundreds of programs he'd coded back in college. "My father worked for the government," he said. "He was a policeman, a peacekeeper. He did pretty mundane stuff, just usual stuff. Finding lost kids, taking down muggers and small-time thieves. He did his job, and he never complained. Swear to God, he'd rather have died than take a bribe." Daniel swallowed heavily and shook his head. "What happened to him?" Annika prompted gently. There was this guy, really crazy guy, must have gone off medication or misdiagnosis or something. He'd killed 2 people by the time Papa found him. I don't know what happened, but the guy got away. Papa came home that night and he looked scared. God, my dad was never scared of anything, but that night, I was 9. I don't remember what he said to Mom, but she started crying and crying, and he just stood there and held her and didn't say anything. Not even "it'll be okay." He didn't say anything. 2 days later, the crazy guy, he got into our house. I was at school, and my mom came and picked me up, and she'd been crying like hell, I could tell. Papa was in the hospital. The crazy guy, he'd come to our house, and Papa had found him, and he'd cut off my dad's hand before the rest of the squad got there. The guy went to prison, but... Daniel was shaking all over, but somehow his voice stayed steady. But Papa was mad. He'd never been so angry. Mom left. I don't remember why, but she left. Maybe it had been a long time coming. Papa got his new hand a couple weeks later, really top-of-the-line thing. They were going to give him a medal, I think, to go with the new hand. And a couple weeks after that, he killed the guy in his cell. Ringing filled Daniel's ears, like he'd put the earplugs back in and was cocooned in silence so deep his brain couldn't comprehend it. They sent him away. To the mines. Vesta, I think. Iron mines. Somewhere far away. I went to live with my mother, and she said the asteroids were the best place for him. Said if he worked hard and didn't cause trouble, he'd be out in a few years. Something had clenched around Daniel's throat and wouldn't let go. He couldn't force any more words past it, so he just shook his head and pressed his fingers into his temples. "I'm so sorry," Minami said. One warm arm encircled his shoulders. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you tell me?" "We've all had someone sent to the mines," Annika told him in her quiet, soft-edged voice. "Alan's sister, Dylan's uncle, Minami's brother, my fiancé. Your father was dead within a month, wasn't he?" It wasn't a question. Daniel nodded miserably, wondering just how these strangers had dragged information from him that he scarcely dared share with himself. They all have that in common, among other things. All 5 worked for the government. All 5 arrested on charges of murder and sent away to the asteroid mines. All 5 dead within a month. The table creaked as she leaned forward on it. "This is not coincidence, Daniel. You know your father did not kill that man, just as Dylan's uncle did not strangle his mistress and my fiancé did not stab a policeman 27 times. Daniel looked up sharply. "What are you suggesting?" he demanded. Annika looked coolly back at him, her eyes glimmering like the iridium rings in her hair. "I am suggesting, Daniel, that all is not what it seems in this country. I am suggesting that our much-beloved and over-observant government is keeping secrets from us, and they have killed people to keep those secrets." "And you want to know what they are?" he asked. "No," she answered. "I want everyone to know what they are." I think that's enough for today. This video has gone on way too long, and my foot is completely asleep. Oh my god. Oh, it's so weird. Okay, anyway, while I try and wake my foot back up, oh my god, I can barely move it. That was fun. I want to read more of this story because I really like it, as is evidenced by the fact that I went 10 minutes over what I was intending to do. So thanks for supporting my reading aloud habit, and I hope you really enjoyed it, because I sure did, despite the fact that my foot completely went to sleep. So if you want to hear more of this story, just let me know, and I will very happily continue reading it, and will probably lose my voice. So, bye!